Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And in studio is somebody that does this content creation. A lot of people will say, oh man, you're a journalist. I am not a journalist. And a lot of journalists create content. But content creation is about exploring whatever worlds of interest people. And she's very experienced in the world of healing folks. So it's a lot of conversations about how do we explore and heal from traumas that we've dealt with, really understanding what the layers of that impact the Black community. And more so, how it can become something that through the healing, you still can be connected with family, friends, and so forth and so on. The content that she creates has welcomed on so many brothers I know that work in community and sisters as well, but brothers I know that work in community around that healing. So it's so dynamic and unique, and someone that my partner for State of Black Detroit, Dr. Yusef Bunchy Shakur, one of those guests, was like, you should have her in the mix. And I was like, yo, I was rapping with her the other day. So now you all get to meet her. Dr. West, how are you doing today?
I am so good. This is like the highlight of my day, and it will be the highlight of my week, I'm sure.
Ain't that something?
Listen, you are the truth.
Oh, man, that is a high standard. That's a high standard.
You live into it every day. You live and breathe this.
Content creation.
Listen,
it is something.
You're a storyteller.
Yeah.
So not a journalist, but a storyteller.
Yeah, it's like it's a mix of a collective of stories.
No doubt.
And I know a little bit of your story from when you came to the studio before. And I still got to start from scratch for the listeners. Your Detroit story.
My Detroit story. So first and foremost, you already know how much I love Detroit. Big ups to Detroit. I have lived in Detroit now for about 8 months.
8 months. See, you see that? She's a part of the 500 that came.
The part of the 500 proudly came to this beautiful city.
Now you can say you know somebody.
I know many people, right?
No, I'm saying like the Detroiters, it's like, who are these people that came? You can say you know one of the 500 now.
I love that I'm one of the 500. I might have to like hashtag that or something.
I like it.
Okay.
And the running joke for where people are coming from that we're talking about is Mayor Mike Duggan said that his goal is to boost, instead of residency losing a population, it will grow in population. And this past year, it grew to 500. 500 new residents. It's the first time we've had a surplus of residents in population in the city of Detroit in forever.
Yeah.
And with that being said, it's a lot of other like stats and data that go into it. But at the same time, the root of it is like, who are these people? You're one of the folks.
Listen, and as I said before, I am delighted to be here. I say often that there is no city quite like Detroit. And, you know, as an outsider looking in, not very far, just a couple hours down the road, night and day from my world. And a world that is so significant to the world. And I don't know one part of the world as we know it that Detroit has an influence in some way, whether they still get the credit for it or ever got the credit for it or not. And so my Detroit story is this. Detroit essentially just kept calling me. And I've worked for myself for the last 17 years as a therapist, as a holistic healer, being trained in Reiki and forest bathing and meditation and yoga, essentially because I'm a survivor myself. And I use a quote often in my work that says something to the effect of that when you set out to heal the world, you realize that you yourself have healing to do. And so oftentimes people who are helpers, who are innovators, who are creatives, who are doing impactful work in community are coming from trauma themselves, right? Both individual and community level trauma, as in the case like a beautiful city like Detroit, right? Detroit has a lot of stories riddled in community trauma. That individuals are still healing from, right? There are still remnants of the trauma that the city has endured, as much beauty as this city has to offer. And so what I realized in terms of my story and my Detroit story, and in part being here, was that Source, and I use Source, God, interchangeably, essentially, was to do this work here, right? I can work anywhere in the world, essentially, and my work has taken me all over as a speaker, as a writer, as a trainer, as a capacity builder, because I've lived in two worlds essentially for the last several years. One as an organizational developer, doing things like strategic and business planning, executive coaching, anti racism, DEI, really a generalist when it came to capacity building. And then I had this other world of clinical work, right? Doing home based, school based therapy, working in the substance abuse realm. And this past year, in fact, coupled with my move to Detroit, I discovered that I no longer wanted to live in two worlds. And I really just wanted to be in the space of healing and liberation. And so it's not a new world that I exist in the context of Detroit, but certainly new in that making a very conscious decision that for this next iteration of my life and the work that I want to do here, deep seated, deep rooted, even though my work takes me everywhere, I have a deep commitment to do this work in meaningful ways here in the ways that Detroit is calling me to. Yeah.
Okay. So many questions to unpack there, which I'm sure we're going to get into as we journey in this discussion.
Yes.
But now I got to go into that roots. You said a
Okay.
couple hours away. From where?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Kalamazoo.
KZoo.
Yes. Born and raised.
The home of Derek Jeter.
At the home of Derek Jeter and many other people, right?
Derek Jeter.
But he may be the most well known, right?
Maybe.
But if you know anything about Kalamazoo, you know that Kalamazoo and Detroit are two worlds, like apart.
Yes.
And anyone who has lived in Detroit and moved to Kalamazoo can attest to this, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And I love both of those worlds, right? Kalamazoo will always be home. It helped to raise me, to nourish me. It connected me. My people are there. My work will continue to bring me back there. But Detroit is home, and I see myself being in Detroit forever. I may be somewhere else too, but definitely permanently in Detroit.
Okay. So with that other side of the state, because surprisingly for a lot of people that aren't always traveling this state, it's a lot of cities and pockets in Michigan.
A lot.
KZoo is definitely one of those pockets that is, it's real interesting. I just had some Kalamazoo discussions from the college most recently. What was the culture like coming up there for you?
Well, definitely very different than being in a place like Detroit. Kalamazoo, just alone, when you think about the fact that there's only 13% African American individuals that live there, right? Versus a city like Detroit that has the largest population of Black people. That in itself is like two separate worlds. But what I will say is that Kalamazoo is a very liberal place and a lot of ideas in terms of thinking, in terms of the way that we invest. Kalamazoo has been the first in a lot of ways, and ways that a lot of the world doesn't know, much like Detroit. When we think about the Kalamazoo Promise, for example, and all of the scholarship programs that exist across the country now, it started as a result of the Kalamazoo Promise. When you think about a funder like the Stryker Johnson Foundation that is very much focused on social justice and being in alignment and partnership and how they give and the things they give to.
So let me put a pin in that so people get a better understanding. And the Kalamazoo Promise, which was a program that many anchored and upheld, and now, thank God, is in so many other places, is the concept of basically saying, look, if you all will stay in state, go to school, your school can be covered. I believe something minimal like a 2.0, 2.5 GPA, a commitment from those students to build that bond with students across the board, no matter what. That relationship built a gateway for students there to know that higher education is an option in America at a time when people thought that college is just something that you're going to have to give up, the farm for, I guess, for lack of a better term or saying. So that promise in so many other thought processes, as I've learned a little bit more about Kalamazoo, is similar to that, the progressive liberal thinking that goes into an academic town. So here in Detroit, I think we're more familiar with Ann Arbor, but I would say that Kalamazoo in some ways is like it can be a little bit more Ann Arbor than Ann Arbor at times.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And don't get me wrong, like Ann Arbor is Ann Arbor, and Kalamazoo is a lot like Ann Arbor in terms of how we think, in terms
Mhm.
of the fact that we're a college town, in terms of like how we invest in things. We have, a cadre of billionaires that have invested heavily in economic development and community development. And it's not perfect. Every community has stuff, right?
Mhm.
But I would say that from a liberal standpoint and my values, as a human being and being very much in alignment with social justice and providing access. So, for example, people would be surprised that we have the Black Entrepreneurial Training Academy there, right? Or some of the other things that exist in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, or for a community our size to have the kinds of arts offerings that we do. So even though Kalamazoo is small, we're mighty in a lot of ways. And I say we, even though Detroit is a part of my we, right?
Mhm.
But because born and raised in Kalamazoo and what Kalamazoo has meant to me. And, I do feel like, can I cuss on this show?
You can speak freely.
Okay, wonderful. I do kind of feel like don't talk shit about my city, right? Because it's my city. It's in part what bred me. There's lots of things that bred me, though. In part, Detroit bred me. The fact that I have spent so much time in Detroit is one of the things that brought me here, right? I became familiar with your entrepreneurial ecosystem. I gained a lot of relationships here. I was a part of Startup Week before the pandemic hit us, right? I was actually on the lineup for the last speaker roster that they had for Detroit Startup Week. So a lot of the innovation that we see in Detroit here, Detroit Startup Week, like, was the preemptus for that. Demo Day was the preemptus for that. I was a part of a lot of that, right? Which in part has shaped me.
So now I want to go back to even like younger you and the
Yeah.
fam and what even brought your family to Kalamazoo. What were those roots?
Yeah. So my family, my mother's side, actually migrated to Chicago, south side of Chicago. And my grandmother's family was from Arkansas.
Mhm.
My great grandparents, at a time when we didn't have access to resorts, much like Idlewild, there were parts all over Michigan and other parts of the country where small shop, folks like my grandparents opened doors so that people could have resort life, right? People that looked like us.
Mhm.
And so I come from a lot of money and I come from a lot of poverty, right? So my great grandparents made a lot of money from the railroad. My great grandfather did. That's in part why they were able to open up this resort space in
Where
South
was it?
Haven. In South Haven.
Okay, so people kind of get the lens too in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo in Grand Rapids, in a sense, are, you could say, the distance between Chicago and Detroit, like between both. So, but especially with Kalamazoo, people will go from like, okay, we'll go this weekend in Chicago, that weekend to Detroit, and vice versa. So that relationship is strong. And those migration patterns that I always speak of Arkansas being west,
Mhm.
usually is one of those patterns to a Memphis
Mhm.
or Chicago. So
Mhm.
South Haven is one of those spaces, kind of like an Idlewild, where we know just through prejudice, bigotry, Jim Crow, racism, whatever we want to call it, black folks were not allowed the same access to the resorts where white folks were.
Yes.
So they created that space near, another thing that kind of goes in these migration patterns, like near where railroad settlements would be.
Mhm.
And they will provide and host families that had time to resort and vacation. So I'm guessing that means your great grandparents were like connected to entertainers and stars and all types of stuff there.
Yeah, and their house was actually pretty close to the Obama's house in South. I mean, so I want to be really clear. That was my great grandparents, and we
Mhm.
lost a lot. They lost a lot in a fire, essentially.
Mhm.
So all the wealth that they had, because it wasn't protected, they lost it. And so I was not a recipient, right, of
Of
this
that.
life that they had.
Was it the Great Fire or was it just a fire?
It was a fire. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, as much as my grandparents knew and as savvy as they were, they didn't protect their assets, much like many of us don't protect our assets today,
And then
right?
I gotta give a lens of America itself.
Come on.
Sometimes when we walk in, even though we hear those stories that we all hear, it's like, I was in the barber shop the other day and I was like, what type of policy is that? Guy said he had renter's insurance and somebody from his own family stole $600 and he actually got paid out on that. And I was thinking to myself, like, look, I'm all for people getting some insurance.
Come on.
But black folks in insurance, like black folks in banking, really black folks in any institution in this nation, don't go hand in hand. So
Yes.
I also would argue it's probably it's probably other layers into the story of what could be provided and how things could be provided, because just owning property outright back then and being black often was illegal.
Come on now. Well, and I love that that's the lens that you put on everything, right? And it's such an important lens because we can't talk about money without talking about systemic racism and the pathways by which we get it and the pathways by which we protect it, right?
Protect it, get it, keep it.
Come on.
What happens to it? The whole concept, reconstruction, and we think of all the wealth created and freedmen's bureaus that they
Yes.
speak of, and then it's like, as they say, the old school phrase, the white man's ice is colder. Think about that one for a second. All old folks be saying that.
Listen. We might just have to get somebody on here to just break all that down, right?
Yeah.
And so my mother grew up in South Haven. She ended up going to Western Michigan University to study nursing. She met my father. My father was from Bastrop, Louisiana. Came from a household of 16.
You
So
said where, Louisiana?
Bastrop.
Where is Bastrop, Louisiana?
And listen, you could blink your eyes and drive through Bastrop and not know it.
That
That's
sounds
how
like
small Bastrop was.
That sounds very Cajun.
All of that.
Yes.
All of that. All of that. So Bastrop is about 45 minutes outside of New Orleans.
Okay. Going toward north, south, east, Mississippi.
Don't get me to lying.
Yeah, okay.
I
guess it couldn't be ever south, but it had to be east or west or north.
And I wish I could answer that question. And it's not just rooted in my lack of knowledge about geography, to be very honest. It's also because that part of my family I'm very disconnected to. I visited my grandmother twice and across my whole lifespan. Unfortunately, she passed away during COVID. I had a very complicated relationship with my dad's family. But that's how my parents met, essentially. And I grew up in Kalamazoo. I never lived anywhere else except Detroit. I've traveled. I'm very grateful to say this. I've been to 6 continents. I've been to nearly 40 countries. I've traveled the world, and yet Kalamazoo is what I have historically called home until Detroit became my home.
Okay. So, and then just being in a town like that, college town, the relationship with education, were you one of those kids that took to like school as being that gateway, being there in a town like that? Or was it one of those things where school was like,
Yeah, that's such a great question. The reason why I had such a positive association with education was because I grew up with a level of poverty that forced us at times to not have a Christmas, right? We would have to be sponsored at Christmas. Or at the age of 10, I started babysitting because if I wanted money, that's what I had to do. There was nowhere to go and get $1 to go. Not that those moments wouldn't happen. Let me be really clear, but they were very rare. And so I knew that if I wanted new school clothes, I knew that if I wanted certain things, I was responsible for getting those because we just didn't have the resources. And so what that meant for me and the only thing I knew based on my exposure was that education would unlock a pathway for me to not live in the circumstances that I lived in. And this is really important because there's 2 things I want to say about this. First and foremost, I talk a lot about how when you come from poverty and you come from trauma, a lot of times you're not thinking about your trauma, right? It's like that you have these experiences that you've had, that they've caused you pain. Maybe it's alerted you in some way, right? Because sometimes you don't even know, right? How do you know trauma unless you've been exposed to something that tells you that it's trauma, right? But I think that this is important because a lot of times, if you come from trauma, you're going to be so focused on getting out of poverty that you will miss some of the things that are really essential to create the wholeness that is really paramount to living your life well, right? To living a life rooted in joy and peace and abundance in all forms. And a lot of times when people think about abundance, they think about money. Abundance is really about the extent to which we are living as fully as what we desire to. And that has to do with what we were put on this earth to do. That's our passion, our purpose. It's also rooted in our ability to live well, whatever that means in terms of our basic needs and the quality of life that we want. It's the extent to which we're moving our body. It's the quality of our connections. Everything essentially is rooted in that. What I also want to say really quickly before you jump in is that even though I was tenacious about my education and I took it really seriously, and I wasn't a kid that all the things that parents are told that you do to create a kid that has a positive association with education, I didn't have any of that. My mother didn't read to me. Not that my mother wasn't present in some ways, but my mother wasn't actively involved in my education in that way, right? But even with all of that and all of the academically talented programs that I was in and all the tutoring that I did for other students, Kalamazoo College is a liberal arts school, college that is in Kalamazoo. It's one of the top liberal arts schools in the country. Why is it that I lived in Kalamazoo my entire life and I did not discover Kalamazoo College until I was already out of college? I had already had my undergrad degree. So how does that happen? How does it happen that you live in a community where you have this prestigious liberal arts school and there are certain students that don't even know that it exists? And my story is not a story that is an anomaly. And so some of this stuff is structural. It's by design, right? Because there's no way that a person like anyone should live in a community and not know all of the educational options, including secondary kinds or vocational kinds of tracks, right? Because formal education is not the only pathway, but we have to be able to get skills and or through entrepreneurship so that we can make a living, essentially.
It's so many things that I would add into that. First, the first discussion point that I would give is trauma and poverty together oftentimes can live and coincide together very much so. Just living in my neighborhood, and witnessing some of the things that make all of the hood sense in the world, and then the functional sense of moving forward, it can be a lot of cognitive dissonance associated with understanding the layers of so much to unpack. With that being said, you also talk about knowing that a school or a resource, any resource, there's so many resources that are right in the open, but never offered and given that opportunity to. And then even when given that opportunity to, who has the I guess tenacity, I want to say, to even look and seek that opportunity, that also can become very key into what happens as far as gateways of opportunities being seized for people. The point that I love that you raised, more so within that, is when you go back and you reflect of what that opportunity could have been. And also when you talk about your mother, where poverty is it's one of the, it's so tough because it impacts just so much movement of everything. But the number one factor that I do think that reigns very true in poverty is the fact of time. And time, I believe, is really, that's the asset that I seek most in abundance, where I feel like I have my most quality of life when I have my autonomy, meaning I get to choose what I choose to do, how I'm choosing to do it within reason, not taking advantage of anyone or anything per se, but more so the autonomy to go about life how I so see.
Yes.
Moving in that passion.
Time is the most valuable commodity that we have.
And when you're in poverty, it's hard to sit and read, let alone think, because so much is inundated and is stacking and is layering on you, let alone if other people are connected to you.
Yes.
And then it becomes a whole it's so funny, like Yusuf saying, it can become like a culture within a culture that becomes like a counterculture, which I didn't think I would drive here, but we here. So similar to the most recent story that has traveled across really the nation of the mother where she's experiencing homelessness. The children die in the car from freezing to death, and she's seeking support from systems, from the father, from other family members, and from the outside in. And we see the snapshot of this story, extremely tragic, extremely traumatic. And then from being in communities where, I'm in the summertime, it'll be on my service drive. I mean, there's people sleeping in the car, So sometimes that still can happen.
Yes.
And understanding the conditions that place people in these spaces, understanding this stuff is fresh in my head from State of Black Detroit. So $35,000 a year is annual income in the city of Detroit. You got about 10% of Detroiters that make about $12,000 a year. So do we have to even it's like, even when you provide what those resources are to unpack the layers of like even what makes sense and what trust and what trustworthy is, some of the things that even happen on my own block. It's a couple people that I know that squat, and I think about times like this, and they'll tap the line, they run something over, and that's all types of fire hazards, possibly blow all the power from my whole block. What do? You know what I'm saying? That part of the neighborhood. You look at it, more men I know that are squatting inside of homes with no water, no heat, no lights. And these are my neighbors, So it's like understanding the layers of all of this stuff and what resources would need to be wrapped around for someone to get towards what we, I guess, quote unquote, consider normal, whatever that means.
Yeah. There's so much that I want to say about this. We, the system, the people that failed that young woman and her children, right? We all failed. We all failed. And I think that in times like this, it's an opportunity for us, if we're willing, right? If we're willing to look at the systems and what went wrong, right? Because then I started seeing that, all of these posts about, well, we're available, but where were you when she needed you? Right. And what I want to say about this too is that I read a stat once that said that foundations are pouring billions of dollars a year to solve problems, right? To solve the most deep-seated problems that we're faced with, like homelessness.
Yeah.
And yet the needle has moved next to none.
Yeah.
So what we know is that money is not the antidote exclusively. There is something about the way that we're using money, which is typically absent of the people that are most affected by the issues, right? Who has gone to the homes to talk to the squatters? Who has talked to the people?
Well, oftentimes from the outside in, like at those times in my life where it's like, oh man, you can go down to the state, say this, the amount of shame, blame, and I know that the person delivering this is a person with a job too, but the process itself, and this is something that I've always said. I say this for entrepreneurship and all of that stuff. And this is me, I guess, getting colorful in language. Get the money to the people and get out the way.
Come on.
If they take the money and they buy drugs with it, so be it. It's not like y'all ain't buying drugs with it. If they take the money and they do, and they gamble it away, it's not like y'all not gambling it away either. It's like it's this belief and system that people that are in these harsh conditions are there because of the choices they've made in life, as opposed to a lot of the choices being made and imposed upon them. Now, I look at this and I think of someone like, someone with many chances that's been recovering his whole life. But we look at a guy like Hunter Biden that's given 1,000,001 chances. And it's many more Hunter Bidens in many of these families. George W. Bush was a Hunter Biden, but just connected to a different type of family. But it's just seen differently from a black lens. It's seen as if from this lens of like, this is imposed upon these people. And then you get a moment in time, which I think was a great social experiment for neighborhoods like mine. During COVID-19, people got that little bit of stimulus money. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the first thing people said is, wow, people don't want to work these jobs because they're not working. People got a little bit extra extension with unemployment. People not coming back for unemployment. Crime dramatically going down. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that owed on debts paid off a lot of those debts. Like, our community functions differently. From being here, I can tell you like the high arc of character that it takes is so many people that just walk away from a lot of stuff because of the shame of having to produce. Like, I mean, if you want heat assistance, you're going to have to produce your clean deed, what's ownership, probably like 3 years of tax returns, what's up to date on the property taxes. Like, you're going to have to go through all of these questions and then even a determination associated with this. Some of this I've kind of seen as one of the organizations I work with, Solidarity, was doing assistance for people with giving assistance for people that were behind on their bills. Mm-hmm. And our thought process was like, listen to the story, hear where it's at. Do I think that some of those people were throwing sauce on it? Most definitely. Mm-hmm. But the little bit of sauce that the person that needs help gets, they shouldn't have to go through 5 standards of questions and these forms and sitting with a counselor and what job, you got to go through job training. You got to go through drug tests. You got to go through, credit repair services. It's like, yo, this person needs a house.
Yes.
Why are we taking through all these forms to quote unquote fix them? Help them. And then after you help them, see if they're voluntarily going to buy into some of those systems that you have as an offering. And then you're going to get a more motivated person to go through the system because they're sitting in that credit check class just thinking to themselves, I'm hungry as hell. And if this is what I got to sit through so that I can get some money, so I can get some food, this is what I'm going to do. And this is a whole lot better than, robbing everybody. And it's also not like a lot of these systems that have been put in place to help communities like mine.
Yes.
Have completely failed.
You bring up such an important topic that we focus on so often, and yet we make it so complicated and so hard. Accessibility.
Yeah.
And there's something about the inhumaneness that often goes into putting processes in place. And I believe that it's sending a message of that you should just be grateful that this support is available to you. And if you really want the support, we're going to take you through a lot of work before we give you this support. And there's a quote that I've used a lot in my work that says something to the effect of, people don't resist being changed, right? People don't resist change, they resist being changed. And if it's really about, and this is why any attachment to support, now I'm not talking about come get the support and help us to collect data on the impact, right? If we're talking about providing a scholarship, I'm not saying that there aren't ways that we can engage people in getting the support, but at the same time, I think that it's so critical that we look at our systems and say, is this necessary? Why do we need this? If we're really about helping people and making sure that they have what they need, and even Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The basic needs, that's the foundation by which we build on. And if people don't have their basics met, we will go to great lengths to survive. Any of us put in any situation will go to great lengths to survive.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And furthermore, it's like even the data points that people speak to, like, look at the community as a data point. Do I need to go through an analysis? Do we got to do a survey? Walk around the neighborhood and see how the people are that you engage with. And that right there is the quality. You can call it quantitative, qualitative, whatever. It's like, the impact of the community just based on being in the community. And if you feel as though things are are in that space where community can be shared. And I think that's the beauty I love about the hood, my neighborhood especially, but other neighborhoods too, is that when we share and we pour in the resources, as opposed to looking at people as if they quote unquote need help, and more so see like, okay, I have this to offer, you have that to offer, let's exchange and let's trade and let's build where we can build. You usually get great results.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say really quickly about what you just have raised is that whatever data we want to get our hands on, we're going to get our hands on it, right? When I moved here, there was a lot that I wanted to know about Detroit. There's still a lot that I want to know about Detroit. So from data that I've gotten my hands on to paint a picture about what is the trauma climate here, right? That helps me to have an appreciation of what I'm walking into in terms of community. But if I stop at just getting the data that already exists, right? Or if I say we need more data and data already exists, or if I'm not actually immersed in community, and this is why I've made a deep commitment to getting to know Detroit, because even though this is my home, I am the new girl on the block. Mm-hmm. The new woman on the block. And because of cultural humility, and I want to say this is so important, that whenever we are working with in a new community, whenever we are working with people to get an understanding of what they want and what they need, we've got to go to the people. We have to be immersed in community. We have to sit down and have conversations. We've got to show up in spaces. We can't say that we care about people and care about community and we don't show the fuck up.
I agree. And also in that showing up, this is more of a social conversation than I expected, but I like this. In showing up, the challenge also is that people have been so disconnected from support systems that are outside of the community for so long. You may have to be present for about 5 years before certain people will walk up to you and finally have a real conversation with you.
And that's a travesty.
I'm just keeping it real. 100 real. That's real. So it's like, so some of it is like, well, these people don't want it. And it's like, because we have to look at it as if, this is, let's put it like this. A lot of Americans love canines. So imagine this is just a dog that hasn't been fed, that's been in a basement for, fed little, like eating whatever scraps of bugs or whatever they can find for 3 years. Now, you put like neighborhoods like mine, maybe like 20 years. I sit on the board of Hope Village Revitalization and the work that Hope Village is doing and piecing together and the resources that it's given to cover the footprint of what this project is versus like the amount of people that have been here and what's happened with the transiency of like what's moved into the renters class between what the landlords deal with, definitely what the renters deal with, what the still homeowners deal with, and that's just from the lens of residency, but let alone like when we think of access to something or somebody giving something that's rich, because so much of everything given to neighborhoods like mine has been so exploited for so long. To trust in something like you not running game, you're going against a lot of what people have seen, because a lot of people have not acted in good faith. And then there have been programs that actually are kind of cool and they start. But that funding may be like a grant that's 1 or 2 years. And then you get people up and then it's like, so then it's like, okay, should I do something if I can't follow through on it?
Yeah.
But then if you can't follow through on it, it's back to like that transparency. Sometimes it's being transparent. Okay, we don't have the funding. We did something with Black men in health. So now I feel like, man, okay, the funding was there last time. We can still do it. It's just going to look different with, Detroit is different funding alone than what we had with some granting funding supporting it. Yeah. But either way, I have to stay committed. If I start an initiative in my community, this is how I feel, yes. and that I don't necessarily want to put that onus on everybody to feel that way. But I do want to say that when you're not thinking that way, and so many things that have started and stopped, or never have come, or have come and been extractive, and then we witnessing a whole lot of the other things that are happening, that are poured into, it's explicitly telling us that it's more value there than in other places. You know, we had all these bike lanes put through our community, and the bus stops look like let's get snowed on. So that naturally already tells you certain things. When we see more care for dog parks than the parks for where kids could go, that tells us something. Like, these are things that people aren't stupid.
Yes.
They're recognizing what's happening.
We're taking in messaging all the time. And there's so much that I want to say about what you shared. You know, what I always ask is, whose work is it? Is this my work? Is this somebody else's work? Is this the work of the system? And all of those things are true, right? We have to first know that, Detroit, because, you know, this is about Detroit. We're talking about Detroit, all things Detroit. There are an immense amount of resources that are here. More resources than I've seen. Kalamazoo, I used to say that Kalamazoo is a resource-rich community, and it is. It absolutely is. Detroit is a resource-rich community. And so that first and foremost, right? So whatever resources that people are in need of, more than likely, there's a resource out here that can address it. That's the first thing I want to say. And you may feel counter to that, which we might have to pick up and talk about it. That's based on what I have witnessed since I have been here, right? And so the second thing that I want to say is that part of our work, and you name this, is about discovering what were we uniquely put on this planet to do, and to be tenaciously in pursuit of it. And when we see problems that are happening in our community, and that's the thing that like is consistently on our mind, we can't stop thinking about, more than likely that's rooted in something that we are purposed to help to address in community. When I became a capacity builder 17 years ago, Kari, I did so under the premise of this. I was on a nonprofit management team, the only woman of color. I was looking at a consultant who was doing strategic planning with us, and I was like, I could totally do that. And I started doing research on consulting. I didn't know anybody who was a consultant, right? I'd never done anything like it in my life. The reason why I said yes to it, not just based on that itch was really about something bigger. And the something bigger was about making sure that capacity building could be available to anyone, regardless of their ability to afford it. And this is why the majority of clients that I've worked with over the years have been BIPOC, and they have been in service of Black and brown individuals. It doesn't mean that I won't work with individuals who are not BIPOC, right? But it means that I have centered the experiences of those individuals who are running those kinds of initiatives, running those kinds of businesses, because I know that knowledge can be very powerful when we're ready to obtain it. And that if given the right kinds of situations, people will rise to the level that they have been afforded to based on the opportunities that have been provided to them and the courage that they have to say yes to it. This is why we've got to take up space, and as much space as we need to. And no matter where we're at in our lives, I say, take advantage of every single opportunity that's available to you. Every single opportunity. I don't care where it comes, if it's going to help to elevate your life, but don't just stop with the elevation for yourself. We get elevated. Source, universe, creator elevates us so that we can elevate the world.
So to that, I have to ask this question, which
Yes.
goes back personal. What gives you the courage to do that, A? And when did you begin to walk in that path of basically giving that maximum effort to what you're offered?
Yeah, you know, a lot of my work with clients, because I'm a licensed therapist, but I'm a certified professional coach. So I do a lot of wellness and leadership coaching with individuals from all walks of life, but predominantly Black women. Those have been the majority of people that I've worked with in the coaching space. When we are clear about what we want, first and foremost, when we're clear about who we are. So the most essential thing is to know that joy and peace and prosperity and purpose are our birthright. We may not know it yet because of where we came from. We may not know it yet because of messaging that we receive.
Wait, I want to hear that again. You said joy, prosperity, and peace.
Yep. Joy, prosperity, peace, and purpose.
And purpose. Joy, prosperity, peace, and purpose are birthrights.
They are birthrights. Now, physical circumstances that show up in the material world, right? This is the material world right now. A lot of times people go on what shows up in the material. So if you grow up in poverty and you don't know anything else than poverty, right? Then you're going to think that poverty is your plight. That's a lie. Poverty is not your plight. Abundance is actually your plight. And it just so happens that unfortunately, somewhere down the line, things have gotten lost in translation, in part because of the systems that have been created that will tell us that we're not worthy of certain spaces, we're not worthy of certain things.
And that kind of goes back to like the knowing who you are.
This knowing who we are. And so people think, oh, this is a hokey question. It's not. There's nothing hokey about knowing who we are. Because when we're clear about who we are, we become unstoppable from that place. We become so clear about our role in life is to become so clear about who we are. Whether you tell me that I'm great or not, I should be so clear about myself that I know that I'm great. Now, I can appreciate the words reflected back to me about my greatness, but because I already know that I'm great, the words that you say to me don't really matter a whole lot because I'm already clear. It's like when Muhammad Ali, I didn't get it until I went to the Muhammad Ali Museum in Louisville. And I used to think that he was so pompous. I'm going to be honest. I was like, this dude is so pompous. The reason why he became great, and I have a great deal of respect for him now because I get it. He knew crystal clear about what he was put on this planet to do. And because he knew that, it didn't matter what kinds of challenges he endured through, he showed up and he put the work in because he knew that he was the motherfucking greatest. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing that anyone could say that would make him think otherwise. Our role in life is to debunk any messaging that we've received that has been anti to the fact that we are great just because we are here and we were put on this planet.
So to that, I would say, now this is like my deeper Kari questions. Like, as people think I'm damn near think I'm a therapist or an attorney, my damn self.
You are. You helping to heal the world now.
Well, I'll take that and honor that. Thank you. It's the bowl. Oftentimes we're reflecting on what we think others will want. Mm-hmm. Kind of like, in a lot of those childhood stories, there are deeper lessons inside of them. A lot of them kind of are taken from other things, but like Goldilocks, for instance. Mm-hmm. All those different bowls. Everybody's porridge. Nothing was ever for Goldilocks. Didn't like any of the porridge. Oftentimes we can be in this realm. And for those that don't remember, Goldilocks, like as the story goes, breaks into the home of the bears and tries Mama Bear's porridge, Papa Bear's porridge, Baby Bear's porridge. Doesn't like any of them. None of it's was ever designed for Goldilocks in the first place.
I love that you're bringing this story up in this context.
So oftentimes when we're in the search of the who are ideas that are placed into from the outside. They're external things that become in ways can distort what intrinsically we're connected to. I'm more in this realm because, marketing is what I study. So it's like a lot along the lines of psychology because we're looking at human behavior.
Yes.
Definitely from that lens of sociology. So like from that lens of like how society can function, and anthropology also. So how do you even define who you are when so many other messages, especially today, can get us off path? I mean, I would say that this device alone,
yes,
like when the studies are done on this.
And what it's doing to our brains.
Yes.
Because we're addicted.
Obviously.
Yes. And so how do we do it, right? We do it by first acknowledging that it's important for us to sit with self. The most important answers to the questions that we have, and any question that we have, there's an answer to it if we sit with it long enough. We live in a society, and particularly when we talk about some of the systems that we named earlier, right? When I was talking about my mom earlier, my mom raised us from a standpoint of what she knew. Mm-hmm. She raised us from a standpoint of what she had, right? So I don't fault her for not doing the things that we're told parents should do irrespective to their children. I don't fault her for the trauma that I endured. Now, her plight is her plight. Her story is her story. Her work is her work. So I think it's first acknowledging that, as the Four Agreements said, that 95% of our thinking is a result of other people's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So all of us have been domesticated, and we continue to domesticate ourselves because we are not willing to sit with the truth of what we know is always present. I'm getting ready to have somebody on my podcast that's going to be talking about how they returned back to their life's purpose. Right? They started with this idea that they wanted to go down this pathway, and their parents said, "You can't go down this pathway. You can't live. You can't take care of yourself on this pathway." And so she veered off from that pathway, and she became very successful within her own right. And then she found her way back, because the thing that is calling us is always going to call us, even when we forget that it's calling us. So as when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a pediatrician. I never ended up being a pediatrician, and I don't have regrets about being a pediatrician. Let me be clear, because if I really wanted to be a pediatrician, I would apply for med school to do that. I became a child therapist. I worked in the youth development realm. I co-founded the Kalamazoo Children's Defense Fund Freedom Schools program. It didn't look the way that I thought it was going to look, but that first inkling that I had to be in service of children, the fact that I wanted to be a babysitter, and I worked in daycare settings, and I thought that I wanted to be an educator, and so I was going to school to be an educator before I finally changed my major to something else. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that when we really go back to our childhoods, there was something that all of us had an inkling for, right? And so part of our work, and the reason why coaching and therapy and yoga and meditation and mindful practices are so important, because those are the practices that help to support us with being with self. When we can get comfortable being still and being with self, we become one with Creator. Creator is not separate from us. We are co-creators in everything that we do. And a lot of times when we talk about God as if God is like over here. And it's like, I use this story oftentimes. It's like God is saying, I sent you the life raft. No, I'm gonna wait on God. So I said, okay, I'm gonna send you another life raft. No, I'm gonna wait on God. And then you get to heaven and like, God, what's up? What happened? I sent you 2 life rafts. What do you mean what happened? God is always speaking to us. God is and every person we come in contact with is a spiritual encounter.
I vibe with so much of what you're saying, and I would echo it and add another layer to it and say that oftentimes, even though the external that's coming back internal, it's still an internal conversation. It's just we're unpacking it. And I think oftentimes looking to fit in more of what we feel would be like, how do we fit in with them? But in reality, we're more so fitting back in with us will help us fit in with them. So I know that's very confusing to people. So I'm going to give it to you all in this example. You all ever, like when I was a rap artist, like being nervous, people's biggest fear is being on stage and public speaking, I think. And definitely public performance. And let me tell you something. As a person that performed, if you go on stage and they say, hey, wave your right hand from side to side. If you do this, it's going to look strange. And you're going to get a lot more of the attention that you don't want. Now, if you do this, surprisingly, people will forget all about what's going on and they'll be like, oh, that look cool, because it's going to fit in mind of where people go. So I'm giving this analogy because I love giving analogies to more so say, like, oftentimes the thought process is, oh, I should wear blue jeans and a black hoodie because I think that's what fits in, because that's what looks cool to everybody else. Mm-hmm. Though in my gut, I really feel like I should be wearing white jeans and a red shirt. Mm-hmm. Now, you wear the blue jeans and the black shirt, and you don't get the results of the coolness that you thought. So now you start kind of resenting the black jeans and the blue shirt. Mm-hmm. Then you start resenting the people that were in the room that didn't give you the response that you wanted from the blue jeans and the black shirt. Then you start thinking to yourself, okay, I just need better blue jeans and better black shirts. All of this still is an internal conversation. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you'd have just wore the white jeans and the red shirt, even if it would have just been 2 people that have been like, yo, fly. You would have then shifted and put so much energy into the two people that supported your own internal conversation for the white pants and the red shirt, that now we're living in the affirmation of this is where I should go versus this is where I think I should be. So I still would give the argument that even the external stuff that's impacting what we do internally is still an internal conversation.
You nailed it, because everything that shows up in the material world is indicative of whatever lessons we are supposed to get in real time to adjust back into self, to start becoming higher. And this, what you just talked about, that dance, right? If the ultimate outcome is to get a better pair of black jeans and the blue shirt, you are still a fraction of who you are. You are still. And so from that place, we can only attract things that are not authentic. Whenever we are not being our authentic selves, we are always going to attract things that don't feel good and feel aligned with who we are. And this is where we start to build relationships that are not good for us. We take on clients that we know damn well we shouldn't take on. We work in partnership with people that our spirit is telling us something's not right. The most important relationship we can build is the relationship with self. And we can't build the relationship with self without the relationship with spirit. And the way that we connect with spirit is through stillness. This is why journaling, meditation, grounding outside, being near a body of water, being in nature, having conversations like this, picking up a book, bibliotherapy is a thing. There are countless ways.
What is bibliotherapy?
I know. Listen, I get to going.
Yeah,
so bibliotherapy is when we are looking for reads that are in direct relationship to things that we are looking to birth in our lives. So for me right now, I've been on a self-love journey for a long time. And I've really amplified that this year. And so right now I'm reading Getting the Love That You Want. A book that I read not too long ago was by Bell Hooks. Oh, it's going to come to me. Something Love, All About Love by Bell Hooks. So both of these bodies of work is about the science behind, in part, like, what does it mean to love and be loved in its purest form, right? And the way that we think about love is not actually love in its purest form. And the second thing is the science behind why we choose the mates that we do anyway, that are oftentimes not good for us, because we're trying to heal childhood wounds unconsciously. Right? We're always trying to heal, whether we're conscious of it or not, always. And so bibliotherapy is when you go and you're looking for particular reads that are going to be related to whatever you're looking to heal, to liberate, to conjure up in your life. I read a lot of things on abundance. In fact, I keep abundance at the forefront because I want to speak the language of abundance always. And I want to do it in an authentic way for my life first and for the life of other people. So those are just a couple examples.
Okay. All right. I vibe.
Okay.
I often, yeah, a lady gets mad at me because I'm always saying, like, and this is just the how I see a lot of things, which I don't necessarily think that that people or things I at this point in life, I don't necessarily say are bad for my spirit. I do believe that I have like my fortress of solitude to build up to navigate through spaces within that. And I guess that's the sitting in self and the meditation and things. But I should command a certain amount of rapport in most of what I do. And it's a space that is very it's not necessarily like I'm there all the time, but I do recognize that it's a strength in that. And I believe we all do. And that's that balance, especially through entrepreneurship, as I've learned through my father, of like, okay, if I can command things a certain way, they fall in place in different ways. But that's also kind of understanding more so what's for me in my entrepreneurial journey. As I often say, I have two great spaces. That's crisis and brand new. When everything is together and all the resources are there and it's fully staffed, creative differences and Detroit is different. In Kari Frazier, we're not getting a call. We're getting a call when it's like, it's going to be kind of tough. And it's like, that means it's extremely tough. Or, look, we ain't really think about this. It's like, okay, cool. But that provides more of the autonomy. It's like I'm walking into the spaces where I want. Because in crisis, we can try, I believe in yin and yang. In crisis is opportunity. Now we can look at the opportunities that were never looked at exploring because things were quote unquote all together. So these are the spaces where it's like, okay, I can command something a little bit different. And it also can be one of those spaces where I really want your perspective on this, because being in the community, how I function and the people I know, it creates relationships that I have with people where I command a certain relationship with people and we're on this wavelength, and they may be with that other person and they're on that wavelength. So it's like, we good money, as I always say to a lot of people. I could see the problems you had with that individual manifesting, but hence I command the this from people.
Yes.
Another further analogy, like with my hip hop days, and it used to throw me off then, but I'm glad for it now. I never was into chiefing, meaning I never was into smoking marijuana. So it limited the access to certain spaces and places I would go with some of the rap shows.
Yeah.
So like, Eminem in the back of St. Andrews smoking with everybody else, that was like access that certain people would have. Because it's like, now you're the guy with some good weed and you're seen in that light from them. Whereas it's like, oh, he's square. He ain't even, So, and at times it's like, man, why can't I get in that circle? But I never would really fit into that circle. But now years later, it's like, you was always kind of on the nerd shit. So, so it's like a different prestige in which I have some of these same relationships where some of my friends that really were on the same like thought process as me, but they moved a little bit different, which created different relationships with people. So now their relationships with some of the people from my past that we've known just as long is so different than my relationship, because we never went in to, buy ounces together.
Yeah.
We never were like, okay, well, let's go get both of them, her and her girl smoke, so let's all smoke together. I was always like, let's do some music, let's go to the studio and let's kind of be there in the box where we kept it. So now I'm able to function in spaces differently.
Yeah. I love that you gave yourself permission, right? You could have been tempted to be out there like that, right? Even taking one little puff, right? Like whatever.
The Bill Clinton,
come on, you didn't inhale.
Yes.
You could have totally did that, and so I commend you for saying no to a space that you knew was not for you, right? And what you're illuminating is that there's a lot of different pathways by which we can get to where we're going. And when we say yes to ourselves and what feels good for us, we're always going to find our way to where we need to be, irrespective to our path. And what I also heard you say, King, in the beginning was about reciprocity, right? Like when you talk about command, and a certain expectation that you have when people are in relationship with you, because you're clear about what it is that you're bringing to the table. And so because you're clear about what you're bringing to the table, you expect that other people are going to also bring certain things to the table. And another thing that I want to say that I think is so critically important is that everybody is not our assignment. Everybody is not for us. So although I appreciate when people give me a glimpse into problems that they've had with other people that have come into my life to bless me, I just tuck it away, because even our enemies can be used to bless us.
And I love that you gave that, because that's so many dynamics in the hood. And even when it comes to that command, I think that it's like those spaces and places. I mean, I've seen it play out in my family so much. It's like I'm such a balance between my mom and my dad. My mom was so giving. I'm not saying my dad wasn't giving, but he's an entrepreneur, so things are more transactional. And with that, some of the times I feel like where people say, "Oh man, they'll take advantage of you," and I don't ever really see things like that. Though I did think that oftentimes about my mother, and because sometimes she would even share that. With that being said, those times when I would feel that way, like if I'm leaning in further, if I'm leaning more across the table, and I'm moving at this level in that wavelength, you know. So another analogy for you, the I guess it could be your grandma or auntie or it could be an uncle or a granddad or whatever in the family that takes care, makes sure everybody eating well, doing well and everything. And then you got your cousin that, take a little bit of this, that and there and maybe, challenged with the narcotic. It's a reason why they not popping up over at auntie granddad house, because it's like in this state I can't move in motion with them. Now when auntie and granddad or grandma and them lean in further, now it's like, okay, now we in that world. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a certain amount of, like, as I say, like that command and level, and it's a balance where, like, okay, when we meet in the middle, this is the standard how we gonna deal with one another.
Yeah.
And that happens in my community so many times because there are so many differences between people for so many deep reasons. The challenges that do exist that are very present throughout our community.
Yeah. I want to name something that encapsulates what you just said. It's about boundaries, right? The reason why that cousin doesn't show up in space like that is because they know they can't.
Yeah.
The reason why people, and so this is why we don't have to, I can relate to your mother so much. I used to say to my ex-husband, I was married for a long time. And I used to say to my ex-husband, I'm never going to do X, Y, and Z again. And he would look at me and say, yes, you are. It's just who you are.
Yeah.
And so what I had to learn and what I am still learning today is to love and to give with wisdom. And to know also that we can't outgive God, universe, source, creator. So whenever we give and it's being done from a place of like your heart is pure, your hands. I heard someone say once that I'm always working to keep my heart clean and my hands clean. And if my heart is clean and if my hands are clean and if God has put on my heart to do something for you, I'm going to do it. And regardless of if you appreciate it or not, regardless of if reciprocity is there later, I did what I was supposed to do. Now, what I'm also called to do in those moments is to watch your movement afterwards. And if your movement is not rooted in reciprocity, my movement will probably be different moving forward. Because we are called to love with a level of wisdom. Because if we just loved openly and just gave, we would be balled up in a corner somewhere because we would be so hurt all the time by all the things. The reason why we want to love with wisdom, which is about boundaries. How do people learn how to treat us? They learn how to treat us by virtue of us setting boundaries.
And I think that some of those boundaries are set through that command too. Because oftentimes,
100%.
even with what, like, you know what I'm saying? Like if I saw somebody playing you, even more so than somebody playing me, I would speak up and say, all right, and I got my own Kari approach to it, but it'd be like, look, you think Dr. West deserve that? And I just leave it there. I wouldn't even go deeper and you know what I'm saying? And then just have it kind of sit in their head. But it also functions kind of like, I think with men, this is always big, the respect thing. And that's another one of those things that I often level, like how I deal to give and continue to give and try to be present. My relationship with respect and what my definition is, I think is in an arc where other people don't have in the first place, especially as a business person.
And can we talk about that? And to hear you say that as a Black man to a Black woman, that makes me feel so seen and heard and valued. Of course, humanity should call all of us to do that. Anytime we're seeing someone else being treated unjustly, I think one of the things that you and I talked about early on was that at times as a Black woman, I don't always feel supported, right, by Black men. I don't feel, of course, from you, I feel support. From Dr. Youssef, I feel support. From a lot of the men that I have shared space with, right, that have been on my podcast here, I felt support-ish, right, let me say, because part of that is about building relationship. But to hear you say that means a lot to me. And so much so that Dr. Youssef and I had a long conversation about, we were comparing Oakland. I compared Oakland
to Detroit.
and the consciousness of Black men in Oakland versus the consciousness of Black men in Detroit. And tons of consciousness, but I think both equally conscious, but not so much. There was a reverence that I felt in Oakland as a Black woman that I don't always feel here in Detroit.
And I give context, and I get into a lot of debates with usually a lot of my homegirls, because I always say I'm team dude, because I think I understand. I mean, me being a man, this is something comedian Patrice O'Neal said this, and I agree with it. I feel like essentially what I am as a man, I'm similar to all of the men. Who I am as a man is signature to who I am. But what I am, essentially, it's like I'm seeing where that comes from. It's a lot of insecurity. So even in me, like understanding that the grounds of like the bigotry or sexism that exists in me is like right now we're in this level having this discussion, and I said this, and this was really controversial. I think I said this in a group, and it bothered the hell out of this man that just got married at this one of my real liberal professors, and I never got invited to another one of their wine parties and shit. But I was like, you're just as sexist as me. You're probably more sexist than those people you think, because you haven't been put in a position where you probably wanted something and a woman got that opportunity. Because when a woman gets an opportunity that you think that you deserve or that you fit, do you immediately turn around and look at that like, what's going on? How do you unpack that? Because men have done that too. And you may unpack that with the same level of hating, but does it become a different level of hating? Do you look at it like she got it just because how she looked? She got it because this is a girls' club. She got it because like you don't really kind of know those realms until you're really put in those situations. And it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think that a lot of, and I don't travel to Oakland as much as Yusef does, but I think definitely Oakland's going through all types of shit like most Black communities. But I think that here in the city of Detroit, in this transition of deindustrialization, and there was industry out there through the docks and things like that, but nothing like Detroit.
Yeah.
And I often say, and I frame it like this, 30 years ago, they say a good man is, do we go to church and do we got a job? And right now, I don't necessarily think you can categorically say yes to either one of those questions. But she go to church and she definitely got a job. So like in this, it's a what we're labeling a power dynamic and shift of even how we evaluate value itself. Because the same patriarchal system that creates the misogyny that I'm perpetuating is also inside of the spaces as we unpack with women as well, which is not necessarily, I'm not saying that it's for it, but I'm just saying like this is where society's internal discussions with one another. So I think it's a lot of brothers here that feel as though, especially, I'm going to say it like this, especially Generation X brothers, and I'm sure it's leaning into millennials too, that feel as though that anger of they have not achieved what they feel as though they have achieved. And then when they look out and they look at what success looks like in our community, it's the face of a Black woman. So by default, she becomes an enemy, similar to like white men feeling as though, I don't know, everybody that's not a white man, white women included, are their enemy. Yes. Now, this is not like I'm not
hear you making an excuse. I don't hear that.
I'm just quantifying it with these Kari thought processes from all these conversations I've had with men. And then we get back into systems and say, it's like, what space do you fit into? And especially me being in a space where I'm in the marketing, I'm in the podcasting. This is not usually the space where you would see a lot of brothers moving, speaking about things like this. That's and in real. Community. And I'm just understanding a packaging and presentation, and back to like what's for me will be for me. That's right. But I do think that it's a level of insecurity and pain here that hasn't been addressed, because we also have, like a lot of older white men, we have that pressure of maybe not our fathers, but other older Black men in the community that are like the older generation X's and boomers, kind of looking at us saying, y'all is some bums.
So I didn't hear an excuse at all. What I heard is the theme of like who you are, which is about context. And I
Mhm.
think that if we're going to talk about something, we can't just make a statement about something. We have to understand what are the roots to this. And the reason why I love that we've gone in this direction, in part because when we think about liberation, and I'm going to talk about Black liberation, right? We can't talk about Black liberation without talking about the divide that happens between Black women and Black men every single day. And I see it being on dating apps. You know, I'm out here, right?
Hilarious.
Hilarious.
I can I
But
can only imagine the initial DMs. I
let me
see.
tell you, I'm getting ready to write a book. Okay, let me tell you. But one of the things that I see more frequently than not is the machoism that exists, right? Like, I'm a masculine man, blah, blah, blah. Like, all of these stances that we take to make it clear, like, this is who I am. And if you're coming in with any strength as a woman, we don't have no room for that. So it's amazing the way. Now, on the flip side, right, there's work for women to do as well, because as much as when we think about oppression, right, we have the oppressed always becomes the oppressor unless we heal. This is why intersectionalism is so important. So we can't just talk about Black liberation without talking about Black women. We can't do that without talking about Black men. We can't do that without talking about trans folks. We can't do that, like all of the intersectionalism that exists. Now we can, but we just have to know that then we're leaving a whole
The
group
lens
of
of
people.
which how we see it is so different. And
Yes.
oftentimes, like when men, it's back to command versus demand. If I have to walk in a room and say that I'm an alpha male or I'm masculine, if I'm projecting any of that, I'm already
It's a
insecure
turn off.
about it. And no, I'm just saying, I'm insecure about it. And
Yeah.
I'm also, that means as though I don't necessarily feel that way anyway. Part of, I think, of one of those key tenets in that, a lot of that masculinity or femininity or whatever, however people are going to treat you, it's like usually it's so interesting because oftentimes it kind of just like your character and just the grace of how you move will bring about a lot of what you get.
Yeah, and even this sense that like we're competing with each other, which we're not, right? Like,
Yeah.
but I understand.
The lens
I
in
understand the
which,
lens. I
yeah.
understand the energy. I understand why I would be a threat to a lot of people, right? Because from if we're talking about a man, if we're talking about a Black man, and the way that we've been socialized, it's like, well, what do I have to offer? Well, you have love to offer me. Why isn't love and connection and partnership, like, why isn't that enough?
And I would say so many things to that.
Like, we have to have another conversation.
We will.
'Cause I want to, like, we should like crack this thing open to talk
Hilarious.
about healing across like Black men and Black women. Like, I would love to have that conversation.
I would love to contextualize all the crazy DMs on Earth, because I'd be like, look, that was the top rope. Sometimes you got to come from it. I'm just
I have some of the most hilarious stories. A lot of them
Yeah.
are going to just be for the book, but things that have blown my mind.
And oftentimes the other space and place too is back to my friend Sterling often speaks about this, like that vulnerability and being able to open up. As men, you feel as though the only space and place to do that is with a woman. So it's like the guard is up high, and then after the guard is up, it's like, okay, after you get past conversation 2, then you're like, he's having an emotional breakdown. And I mean, it's happened with me. I'm, as much as I'm saying this, I'm not even necessarily, I'm recognizing it, but just because I can recognize it doesn't mean like I don't have the tools. You know, one of the guys that does engineering here was like having a breakdown and crying over something. And I'm like, you know, I just gotta, you good? Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if we hugging it out. It's like, I'll still pay you, but I need to.
But let's hug it out, right? Let's hug it out. Why don't we've got to normalize, right? Because for me, there's a real gift, and I see you looking at me with some skepticism. Okay,
I'm just saying,
I love it. Look at me with all that skepticism, okay? But what I think that we have to normalize that all sexes, no matter if you are non-binary, female, male, you have the same range of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
how we express them. And I'm not saying that men and women and non-binary folks, I'm not saying that we're the same. Let me be really clear. But I'm saying that as a human, we all experience the full range of emotion. So when we experience these emotions, where do they go? As men, when you're sad, when you're angry, and let's be real, if we've been socialized, in which many men have been socialized to grit and bear, to not show anything, anger is acceptable. Anger is acceptable. Any other emotion, even joy, can feel like a threat. Even joy. This is why we say things like, "What you so happy about?"
Yes.
Why is my joy?
I've gotten why you smiling my whole life. And usually,
can I be happy?
Usually, I'm not even smiling. I'm laughing about something because I find life like a big. And it's less
and what
me.
A gift.
It's just like life is hilarious. Like even this discussion, like you said, why are you like? Because I'm just imagining two brothers out of nowhere, like, let me give you a hug. I'd be like, hey, yo, my G.
But you know what? This is actually one of the things that I want to say. In contrast to what I've seen and what I felt as a Black woman, I have seen Black men loving on Black men here.
Yeah.
That has been such a beautiful thing that I feel is so rare, right, across the country. So I'm not sure what's happening in privacy with these men, but I see these brothers like hanging tight in all kinds of spaces. These like ace boom coons. So if you can't feel safe to like cry in the midst of your ace boom coon, where do you feel safe? Only in the presence of a woman?
Usually I would go as far, I'm speaking on behalf of the constituency of men. I know definitely I'm not a person that cries often, but I do meditate often. And I think certain things just unpacking because just the levels of relationships. I have some really close friends. Like I love my homies. And even within those relationships, oftentimes we're joking about each other, joking about different stuff. But that's cool because that's a good space for me to like get heavy stuff off my mind. And I do think that I do think that like if we think of community coming together and what roles that looks like and where that freedom comes from, I believe that Black women are for me, I believe that Black women in the life of a man is more of the purpose and the journey. It's being it's looking for the balance to like get those anchors to complement more of myself. So it's like, okay, am I at the best I'm at? Where do I need to get better to continue to command more and more and more and more and more and more from life? That's my thought process of it. So I'm not necessarily saying it's not a space of joy or happiness, but it's more so a space of like, okay, let's extend in this space where more will come in, because you connecting with Black women, you connecting with families, you connecting with community, you connecting with, God knows what. I mean, tomorrow it could be, this was my passion and now this is my passion. So now anchoring what that is within things of where my role can play and exploring these worlds through her, I think that is beautiful.
It's a gift, and that's what love is, right? I used to think that I didn't want love to change me. I do want love to change me. I want love to change me for the better. And all of our relationships, whether it's brotherhood, sisterhood, a romantic relationship, the best relationships are the ones that see us and accept us and for who we are, but also see what more we could be. And they love us towards that. They love us through that. Not force. Let me be very clear.
Yeah.
But they love us through that. And they love us through everything that we show up with. What you said earlier reminded me, I just got done watching Olive Martin.
Shout out Martin.
Come on now. Like, never gets old. And seeing him with his boys and like these very tender moments and like the reluctance to hug or like all of these awkward things. And that's so real. And the fact that they're displaying this in such a humorous way makes it feel like it's more acceptable. And I want this for all of us to become the norm. This is one of the things that I love that Dr. Youssef is talking a lot about lately about Black men and vulnerability, right? Because all of us can afford something positive from being vulnerable. And yet we know that contextually it hasn't been safe for Black men to be vulnerable,
I,
for Black women to be
I
vulnerable.
I would say our community, Black children as
Yes.
well, and especially when it comes to Black men, because in that space of vulnerability, the thought process and the fear of being exploited, and then furthermore, what their response is.
Mm-hmm.
So this, even it's like, okay, I laid out everything. You know what I'm saying? I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with that. What support can I get? And it's like, I'll pray for you. And it's like, I was praying for myself. So sometimes it's back to like that functionality. As it was actually one of my goddaughters that taught me this. Shout out to Delay. That she was like, sometimes women just want to talk and just let the problem out. They don't want a solution. And it's like, that sounds crazy. But thank you for that.
But it's real.
Whereas as a man, to talk out a problem and not be given any form of like what a support or solution would be, it does two things by default. Like it could be like, okay, now I'm on a space where like you still dealing with that caretaking issue with your auntie and dementia. So I don't even know what type of bandwidth you got to be present with the stuff that my life is banking on this. You know what I'm saying? A and B, it's not like I'm gonna say, yeah, now you want to pull up for 2 hours and cuss me out. Come on. You know what I'm saying? So it can be, for me, and I'm speaking on other brothers that I think are kind of similar, where that space can lie. Hence, even sometimes like those check-ins where it's like, how are you doing? It's like, good. It's like, no, how are you really doing? It's like, do you really care? You know what I'm saying? So it's how do we function? How do we connect? Now, so many young brothers, you met one of them, that are working with me. So just being more mindful also in like, okay, how do we keep that prestige, the character, checking in with them, making sure things are good. Because Lord knows, I know when I was their age, I wouldn't even have the presence of mind to do the stuff that they doing, let alone it's still, 18, 19, 20, like all this stuff stirring up. Like, how do you help anchor that? I don't know. Because when the larger problems present themselves and they don't have a solution and you shared it, this goes 360 back to recall. You feel kind of like the sister that's experiencing homelessness, and it's like, I've shared my problem with everybody and I have no solution other than keep praying. Why don't I just keep praying?
Yeah. And so I really appreciate everything that you just shared, because there is something that's a little arbitrary about the ways in which we engage when people are exposing themselves to us, right? So there's a couple things that I want to say. I mean, when we think about vulnerability, first and foremost, vulnerability is like, if I put my toe in the water and I share something, I'm going to say a lot. And back to this woman that needed help and we failed her. But in vulnerability in general, it's about like, what happens when I reveal something to you about me? Do you then reveal something about you to me? That's how you know that reciprocity is that's how you know that you're building safety. It's like a buildup, right? So in most situations, that's how we're invited to build connection with people, and knowing that real deep connection doesn't happen for a good 120 hours. If you're looking at creating depth in a relationship, it takes time and real energy. The other thing that I want to say is that when we think about what can we do? What do we feel led to do in these moments when someone is sharing their story with us, right? So first and foremost, we can ask, do you want me to help you solve this problem? Are you telling me because you just want me to listen, right? In the case of somebody coming to you to get help, right? They need money, they need something, then that's different. Like the extent to which we're going to provide help is going to be based on what the situation is. And I'll never forget for months when I first moved here, people would say, be safe out there. And I found it so hilarious because it wasn't just one person saying it. It was something arbitrary, just like we would say, hey, how are you today?
Yeah.
Right? It's just a thing that you say here. And do you really care about me getting home safe? Or is it just something that you say to close and to end a relationship? Or do you ask somebody how they're doing because you're trying to start a conversation with them? And so instead of doing these arbitrary things, and I'm not telling folks not to say be safe out there, right? Because I know that that's a thing. But what I want to say is that I invite us to question the authenticity by which we're expressing something. And if we really care about someone, we might say something like, how's your heart? How's your spirit? What's on your mind today? Right? It might be that we care enough about someone that we know that they're struggling with something. So we've checked in with them to say, hey, you good? You were in my spirit today. I just want to make sure you're good. Or I just want to put this money in your Cash App because I know that financially you're struggling. I know it's not a lot right now, but this is what I feel led to do. Because if all of us move through the world in this way, that in itself would solve so much.
Mm-hmm.
It would solve so much if we always came from a place of truly slowing down enough to be in connection with people, even strangers. I've had random people that have called me, and no lie. I had a woman call me once who I didn't know how she got my number. She claimed that she was homeless and she was getting ready to run out of gas, blah, blah, blah. And not blah, 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 right? That's not how I felt when she first said it.
But
okay?
This is, yes.
Okay.
A little more to that.
Exactly. So I was like, so my first inclination was, okay, this woman is in the car with her babies. She's trying to get to this homeless shelter. I don't know why she doesn't have money to get there, but I'm about to put some cash. I don't even know who this person is, right? So I'm going to put this Cash App in her this money in her account. So then she calls me back, right? And she starts telling me all, and I've had situations like this happen. And I just said, well, you've gotten, if indeed the story that you told me, the money that I gave you was enough to get you to the shelter. And so now that you're at the shelter, supposedly they should be able to get you all the support that you need at this point, right? And so then she called me back again because for her, now mind you, was she scamming me? There's a good chance that she didn't really, was she an addict? Was there, I don't know, all of those things. But I know in that moment, I felt like I needed to give her some money in her Cash App. Mm-hmm. And I've had many moments like this where people have been like, they're scamming you. Okay, well, if they are, that's their karma. I did what my spirit told me to do in this moment. So if this person is trying to get over on me, they're only going to be able to get so far with me, first of all. Right? And second of all, like I did what I felt called to do in that moment because I imagined what that would be like if this story was real.
I love that you said that, and in this space and community work that I lead, it's like I'm gonna start a new show soon, just talking about community organizing. But you have to have that willingness where that's gonna happen. Like I'm gonna make it I'm gonna start making bingo cards of like we're gonna see this, we're gonna see that, we're gonna see this, and we're gonna see that, we're gonna see this, we're gonna see that. You know, Jewish people do it better. Black people, we hate each other too much. We need to get this on TV. Just all of the stuff that we're used to seeing and connecting, like in the defeated attitudes that do present themselves, which to a lot of those defeated attitudes is some substance and some context there for them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not dismissing them, but also just the almost blind faith of just continuing to move forward. And similar to, like you say, giving no matter what. I think giving no matter what is that relationship is with me, less with them, because I'm pouring in to something that is the giving spirit. And that's what I also learned from my mom, even of recently. I don't necessarily believe the whole, like, if you give, it bounces back tenfold. I don't spend 10,000 tomorrow. Don't tithe 10 G's and then expect 100,000 back the very next day. I don't think it's linear like that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But usually from a place of pureness, other favor is held. Mm-hmm. And then more so than the favor, the beauty of it for me is the way that I can move, the relationships I have with people, the reverence that, and the people that I consider like, oh yeah, I build with dude. Like that's so cool for me to have those relationships.
Yeah.
You know, like I may not necessarily know the CEO when I walk in the room, but it means so much more when I walk past the custodian that you may call a janitor or the engineer, the building engineer. They be like, yo, man, I remember you from the collard green cook-off. It's like,
which was dope.
that means so much more to me than knowing the CEO.
Yeah.
I look at like the CEOs and the board of directors. We're playing transactional. That's the business world. That's my dad's stuff. But if the people in the parking lot can connect to me, if you know what I'm saying, like I'm always joking with, you know, the fancier places like, yo, give me some hot sauce from the back of the kitchen. Y'all know y'all got it. Like that's the group of people that I want to have relationships with. And I feel that it's just more sincere there. We can break that down a lot further than what's being presented with the auras and the pageantry of what quote unquote things are supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because this is my neighborhood. I'm closer to a lot more of that than I think what a lot of other people would think. I already feel like my life is in a double bonus. Like I'm surprised I'm doing the stuff that I'm doing right now. And moving in that space is why I'm often laughing, because it's almost like a running joke that I'm in the spaces that I'm in, you know, as the great Rick James once said, getting kicked out of some of the spaces I've been kicked out of. It's like, I wasn't supposed to be here in the first damn place. So I'm surprised y'all white people let me in here.
Well, and I love that you're just acknowledging that, like, your joy in part is rooted in the fact that you're living out your purpose.
Yeah.
And what I heard you say about the custodian and the relationship with the people is just that. The people are the people. And part of our work is to love ourselves so much that we see ourselves reflected in the people, and we're willing to be with the people. And the reason why we can be with the people is because I'm not connecting with you from a place of sympathy. I'm connecting with you from a place of empathy. I see you because I see something in myself. And that's the only real way to sustainable connection with people, right? If we don't see ourselves reflected in the lives of other people, whether we come from a certain place or not, we've got to be able to connect with something. And we have to first say that all people are valuable. All human life is valuable. And that value is not rooted in money. It's not rooted in title. It's not rooted in connection. And, you know, you just named, like, if we're talking about the 10,000 to get 100,000 back, no, God does not work transactionally. But that human capital that you just talked about, those doors that open that maybe folks kicked you out of, right? Because you came to disrupt some shit. The spaces that you organize in, the people that you have come and bring on, all of that is a part of living a rich life, is living a life rooted in abundance. It's not, and not to mention the ways that the people in our world get to benefit from our giving as well. It's not just about coming back to us. It's about coming back to all the people that get to appreciate the fruits of our labor.
And they're just an extension of me. It's like, I think the two things most abundant in neighborhoods like mine, it is the creativity and the social capital.
Yes.
And that's harder to quantify in these markets that are not as abundant in that. Hence, the value placed on that doesn't make the right sense. Hence, some of the coolest things we do, you know, like for the collard green cook-off, the outreach is through my grandma street team. It's like this group of these grandmas are already in the community meetings. They already got the built-in relationships. It's like I'm paying them, and I pay my grandma street team. They just gonna turn around and give back to the community or their family anyway. So it's like it's adding more community to it, because that's what often people say, like, how did you put this intergenerational connection together? And I'm like, the grandmas got that together, because I got out the way instead of telling them what to do. And it's like, you know, I can do the videos and I can do the graphics, and they already got the relationships. And then, you know, Tony McElwain and them pound the pavement, and it's like, we gonna bring the church group over there. And it's like, that's good.
Let me tell you, I mean, I feel like this is the second time the collard green kickoff has been brought up, and you know I was there.
Yes.
In my green dress, matching with
We
the
love it.
greens,
We love
okay?
it.
And so if y'all have not been to the collard green cook-off, you have got to get there. I cannot wait to go this year. I had some of the best greens ever. I think I ate so many greens that I might have gotten full just on greens,
Hilarious.
okay?
I love it. I love that you were there. And it's like one of those experiences that, that we're going to pour in and grow
Yes.
and connect more communities. So with that, we get into a close. And you're right. We definitely need to pick up this discussion. So in close,
Yes.
pump your show. How do people get more of these conversations?
Yes. So I've got the Be Well Beautiful People podcast, as you know. So that's one of the ways that people can tune into our 100+ episodes that we have available. Started out as the Be Well Beautiful Woman podcast, then we rebranded to the Be Well Beautiful People podcast. So you'll hear that reference in some of the beginning episodes, but all the episodes that have been shot here have been under the auspice of Be Well Beautiful People. We've got some great Detroit-based individuals that were a part of the Alchemizing Trauma for Community Impact series and have a lot of content that's going to be upcoming soon that I'm super, super excited about. I'm going to be doing a series on individuals who have been incarcerated and they're out living their best lives right now, whatever that means, irrespective to them. So I want to do a series to talk about some of the inner things that keep people from being well in the prison system, that actually, prevent them from being well, that in part led them to getting there, and then their pathway to wellness once they got out. And a lot of other series like that are really meaningful to the mission that we have. And we've got a couple day retreats, and we've got a virtual retreat coming up and some day retreats coming up that folks might be interested in. The virtual retreat that we have is going to be on March 10th. It's part 2 of Black Women, the National Black Women Rest Day, I believe. I'll make sure that I'm saying that right. So I apologize if I slandered that. That's going to be on March 10th. We've got 2 that are available. We're offering that free just to support women, Black women, individuals who identify as Black women to be a part of that experience. That's going to be from 3 to 6, 12 to 3. And then from 5:30 to 8:30, and that's a free offering. And then I think our first day retreat is going to be on April 12th. As you can see, I'm looking at my phone right now because I want to make sure that I'm giving you the right information. Those day retreats, we have 3 of them coming up. It's going to be on April 19th, July 12th, and October 11th. And we are partnering with Dr. Youssef, Mama Cool Community House on those, along with MSU Extension.
Cool.
Yeah.
All cool. Cool.
Yes.
All right. So I like that. Now we got to get into some classic Detroit is different questions.
Okay.
Very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
Ford Focus. I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
It was my first car. So I'm 44.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever year that was.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry.
Where's the first place you went when you got it?
That's a good question. I feel like I went to Target, and I hate saying that now based
Oh,
on what
man.
Target
It's like,
is.
you should have been back in the day.
I know. Please don't be mad at me, Detroit. I'm pretty
you.
sure like Target used to get a lot of my money, y'all. They don't get my money like that anymore, though. Okay.
See, that's another. My show gonna be called "I Love My People," but the biggest people online talking that the boycott don't even shop at Target, and that's classic Black people stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's like
that's something.
It'd be like, yeah, don't listen to I don't know.
Wait, it's easy to say that when you never shop somewhere.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Okay. Although I'm not like illegitimizing some of the boycotting.
I can boycott the hell out of Banana Republic. Never. I can't believe it. But it's I'm just because I know these people and they don't shop there, and it's like which I'm not defending one or the other, but it's just like
that's a little
you gotta be a person that shops there to wave the flag as loud. But I know that's gonna probably have me in all types of other Black discussions, and it's like, brother, I only buy Black from Black people from the motherland, and it's like, okay, well, you kind of don't shop there anyway.
That's real. And I would love to know who this person is who's only buying Black all the time, 100% of the time. We need to have a show just on that.
They're the online persona of many.
Okay.
Or they are the real life. They are the real life live in a house where other people shop.
Okay, wait a minute. Can we just keep it all the way real? Let's just keep it all the way real. We have like several shows that we already have on the lineup, Kari. Okay, all of the shows. The Audacity, right?
The Audacity series. Yes. And that's another thing I love black people. Black people have some I love it. I love it. You be like, man.
Stop it.
It's like, you ain't buying nothing anyway. She buying everything.
So can we please stop?
It's like you can say, I boycott everything. I don't buy nothing.
Which would be true. Which would actually be true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Matrix.
Yes.
All right. So you're the DJ at the end of the fireworks at Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What songs you playing?
GJ got us falling in love again.
Okay.
That's like my go-to.
Okay.
And this is gonna somebody's gonna be really happy I said it. It would have to be some Glorilla song. Something.
Oh, Glorilla.
Yes. The person.
Glow.
Shout out to the person who knows and who loves Glorilla.
Yeah, Glow. It's like, that's another thing. Well, homies was just joking. What are the last?
Should I say? But maybe I need Cash too.
Yeah, Cash Doll.
Maybe I need Cash Doll too.
I don't know. We going Detroit Diamond now. All types of.
Listen, any Detroit artist would have to also be on the lineup.
Okay.
How about
All right,
that?
there we go. And then last question for a person that comes to Detroit. Alien comes down spaceship and says like, yo, take me to the most Detroit place ever.
Oh my
Where are you taking Alien?
Oh, the most Detroit place ever. That's so hard because there's so much here in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that are Detroit.
Yep, you walking around with E.T.
And I'm walking around with 18. Can it be something that like is near and dear to my heart?
It is.
E.T.
came to you.
It would have to be the Charles Wright Museum.
Okay.
It would have to be that. I spent a lot of time there. I love art. I love Black history. And, Detroit is known for the museums that we have. So I would have to take the Alien to the Charles Wright Museum.
I got you. I'm with it. It'd be in there with an alien walking around.
I can picture it now.
Kicking it.
I need a picture of me and this alien.
Hilarious. Hilarious. I love it. That's another thing why I always say we are peaceful people.
Yes, because we just
Black experience for aliens is not they gonna take over and extract stuff. They gonna be like, oh, we gonna kick it with them. We going to the park.
Come on, friend. Can you fit in my car?
Yeah, exactly. I know about that. It's like we ain't cleaning up this alien goo. Let's ride in the spaceship.
This is real. The spaceship can just take us there, Kari. Why am I talking about my car?
Alien gonna be like, don't touch nothing.
Alien's gonna be like, I can snap my fingers and I can just take us there. We can just get there.
I know the audacity.
Instantly.
Like, I want to ride this tomorrow. Like, come on now. Like I'm gonna be in a spaceship and not try to push it. Come on now.
That's real. I would love a ride in a spaceship.
All day. All right. With that being said, thank you, Dr. West.
Thank you. This has been such a pleasure. I appreciate you and everything you do, King.
Thank you. Peace.